Hello and welcome. Thank you for tuning in for another video. Today, we are going to be talking about the worst flood in U.S. history. One that killed over 2,000 people in just minutes and wiped an entire town off the map. Before we begin, please make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. You're not going to want to miss some of our upcoming videos. Again, thanks for listening. This is History You Didn't Know. Thursday, May 30th, 1889. Johnstown, Pennsylvania had just finished their Memorial Day ceremony and parade when it began to rain. Situated on a plain between the Stony Creek River and Little Conemaugh River, Johnstown had become accustomed to spring flooding due to heavy spring rains and snowmelt in the nearby mountains. But there was nothing that could have prepared them for what was about to happen. First settled in 1770, Johnstown, Pennsylvania had become a thriving city in the heart of the booming American steel industry. With more than 30,000 residents, Johnstown was filled with homes, churches, saloons, factories, a library, a railroad station, electric street lights, a roller rink, and 2 opera houses. It was a truly thriving American city. Two days earlier, before the Memorial Day celebrations, on May 28, 1889, the residents of Johnstown went about their day as they always would. Working in nearby mills, factories, and across shops and offices along dozens of busy streets. Unbeknownst to them, 1,200 miles to their west, a low-pressure system was developing over the American plains of Kansas and Nebraska. This weather system would arrive in Johnstown Memorial Day afternoon, dumping as much as 10 inches of rain in 24 hours, in what the United States Army Signal Corps called the heaviest rainfall event that part of the United States had ever seen. The torrential rains turned calm creeks into raging torrents of water overnight. Swollen waterways ripped out trees and carried debris downstream, knocking down telegraph lines and washing away rail lines. At daybreak on May 31st, the Conemaugh River, which ran through the middle of Johnstown, was at the top of its banks. 14 miles upriver from Johnstown stood the South Fork Dam, an earthenwork dam built decades earlier as a reservoir for the canal system, which had been used to transport goods via canals throughout the region before the onset of railroads rendered the canal system obsolete. No longer needed as a public works, the South Fork Dam and Lake Reservoir, known as South Fork Lake, were sold to private hands. The South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club purchased the dam and reservoir a few years later after the local railroad company held ownership for a short period of time. A retreat for the ultra-wealthy, offering exclusive membership to just 50 families, the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club built many cottages, a clubhouse, and other facilities along the lake. Members included Andrew Carnegie, Andrew Mellon, Philander Knox, and Henry Clay Frick. To satisfy the interests of their members, the club raised the water level of the lake to offer better boating and a more picturesque setting across the 2-square-mile lake. Between 1881 and 1889, the dam frequently sprung leaks which were poorly repaired with a primitive combination of mud and straw. Standing 72 feet high and 931 feet long, the dam held back more than 14 million cubic yards of water. Head of the Cambria Iron Works near Johnstown and South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club member Daniel Johnson Morrell raised concerns about the dam on at least a couple of occasions. As the residents of Johnstown awoke on May 31st, 1889, to flooded streets and a river at the top of its banks, Elias Unger, president of the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, began his day on his farmhouse on a hill just above the South Fork Dam. After a night of unrelenting rain, he immediately noticed the dangerously high water levels of Lake Conemaugh, of which the South Fork Dam held back. The sky still unyielding with rain, Elias Unger rushed outside to assess the situation and saw the lake water nearly cresting the dam. Unger, terrified of what he saw, and knowing full well the dam was at risk of failure, desperately assembled a team to try to save the South Fork Dam. A previous owner of the dam had removed 3 cast iron discharge pipes for scrap. Having never replaced these discharge pipes, the only way to lower the lake's water level was via a spillway, but the rapidly rising water levels had clogged the spillway with debris. Unger's team worked feverishly to unclog the spillway. Men also attempted to dig a ditch at a lower point of the dam in an attempt to slowly drain the water level and avoid full catastrophic failure. Their efforts proving unsuccessful, South Fork Club engineer, John Park, considered cutting through one edge of the dam where the pressure would be less, still flooding the valley, but more slowly. He and Unger decided against it as they felt the slow release would likely still lead to the entire dam collapsing. Instead, it was decided to continue to try to save the dam, but also warn the residents of Johnstown that the dam may soon fail. Twice that morning, under orders from Unger, Park was to ride on horseback to a telegraph office in South Fork Town to send warnings to Johnstown. Instead of going himself, Park sent one of his assistants. These early telegraphs reached Johnstown, but were not taken seriously. Many false alarms had been sent in previous years, and the fact that Park had not gone himself to express the gravity of the situation led the authorities in Johnstown to believe that this was, once again, a false alarm. Unger, Park, and their group of men continued to work for hours, desperate to save the dam. At 1:30 p.m. they abandoned their efforts, believing it was futile and the dam would fully collapse at any moment. They ordered their men off the dam and to fall back to nearby high ground where they could do nothing but wait. Downriver in Johnstown, the situation had rapidly deteriorated. The warning sent in the early morning hours had not been taken seriously. Since then, water levels rose rapidly in the town, filling some streets with 10 feet of water, trapping residents on rooftops and higher stories of buildings. Before the dam's failure, a final attempt was made to warn the people of Johnstown, but the velocity of flooding had knocked telegraph lines down, making communication impossible. Between 2:50 and 2:55 p.m., 70 minutes after Unger ordered his men to stand down from their attempt to save the South Fork Dam, water breached the dam. It took 65 minutes for the lake to fully empty. Some 14.5 million cubic yards of water across the 2-square-mile lake was unleashed on the valley below. Johnstown was located 14 miles downriver from the dam and at an elevation 450 feet below Lake Conemaugh. To make matters worse, the flood of water picked up more and more debris as it swarmed down the valley. Not far from the South Fork Dam stood the 78-foot-high Conemaugh Viaduct. As the debris smashed into the viaduct, water was held back. The water level began to build again behind the viaduct and massive debris field. For 7 minutes the 78-foot-tall viaduct held. As more and more water amassed against the viaduct, its collapse was inevitable. This renewed hydraulic energy resulted in a stronger and more abrupt wave racing down the valley towards Johnstown. Mineral Point was the first town to be hit after the Conemaugh Viaduct gave way. This small town was about 1 mile from the viaduct and consisted of around 30 families on a single street. After the flood hit, no structures, no topsoil, and no subsoil remained in the town. All had been stripped away by the power of the water. The earth was left completely barren. There was only exposed bedrock left in the town. The next town to be hit was East Conemaugh. An eyewitness perched on nearby high ground described the water as not looking like a river or a body of water at all. It was filled with so much debris it appeared to be the huge hill rolling over and over. Hearing the storm of water thundering down the valley, locomotive engineer John Hess threw his train engine into reverse, racing backwards towards East Conemaugh. He blew his whistle constantly, trying to warn people to get to high ground. When the flood hit, it tossed his still-moving train off the track and carried it further down the valley. Hess himself survived, and his warning is believed to have saved dozens, but more than 50 people lost their lives in East Conemaugh, including 25 trapped in trains at the town's train station. Before hitting Johnstown, the flood hit the Cambria Iron Works, killing 314 people in the surrounding area and picking up miles of barbed wire from the Gautier Wire Works, which further ensnared the massive debris field. As the water raced through the Gautier Wire Works, it caused several boilers to explode, sending large clouds of black smoke into the air and setting some of the debris field on fire. The sound of the boilers exploding and the resulting black smoke clouds were the first signs the residents of Johnstown had of the impending disaster. 57 minutes after the dam collapsed, and only minutes after the floodwaters raced through the Cambria Iron Works, the floodwaters reached Johnstown. What ensued is almost indescribable. By this point, the raging water was traveling at speeds over 40 miles per hour and had an average height of 60 feet in places. Many residents had nowhere to escape. While some residents were able to escape to high points in the city or near the edges of town, thousands were caught up in the raging floodwaters. Residents were crushed by debris, entangled in barbed wire, and drowned. The sheer force of the water stripped 4 square miles of the city completely bare, an area large enough to hold nearly 2,000 football fields. In the center of Johnstown stood the substantial and aptly named Stone Bridge, a railroad crossing over the Conemaugh River. As the water hit, the bridge acted as a second dam. The debris, picked up over 14 miles, collected here and halted the water's advance. As the tsunami of water hit the bridge and debris field, water bounced off and rushed backward up the valley, before gravity once again forced it down the river. This resulted in a second devastating wave hitting Johnstown. The floodwater still flowing, fire spread across the debris field stuck against the stone bridge, trapping people clinging to the debris. More than 80 residents died from fire on the debris field. When the water receded, the debris against the stone bridge covered an area of 30 acres and stood 70 feet tall. The inferno continued to burn for 3 days. In all, 2,209 people lost their lives in the Johnstown flood. To this day, in terms of lives lost, the Johnstown flood is the second largest natural disaster in U.S. history, only surpassed by the 1900 Galveston hurricane. 99 entire families died in the flood. 396 children were lost, 98 children were orphaned. Bodies were found as far away as Cincinnati, Ohio. The last body was recovered more than 20 years later in 1911. 777 people were never identified. Their bodies are buried in the plot of the unknown in the Johnstown Grandview Cemetery. The American Red Cross, led by Clara Barton, arrived in Johnstown shortly after the flood. Barton and more than 50 doctor and nurse volunteers provided food, medical care, and tent shelters for victims. It was the Red Cross's first major deployment and established them as the preeminent emergency relief organization in the United States. The Red Cross remained in Johnstown, providing relief for 5 full months. Johnstown's call for help was immediately answered by the surrounding areas. A 900-man crew, led by demolition expert Dynamite Bill, arrived within days to clear the massive debris field and wreckage surrounding the stone bridge. At its peak, more than 7,000 relief workers worked day and night, 7 days per week. A series of legal challenges by victims of the flood in the following years proved unsuccessful. The owners and members of the South Fork Club successfully argued in court that the dam's collapse was a natural disaster and an act of God. At the time, American law for such cases was fault-based. The catastrophe of Johnstown played a key role in changing laws to one of strict liability. Despite not being found at fault for the dam collapse and catastrophic flooding of Johnstown, the millionaire members of the South Fork Club contributed to the rebuilding of the town. Around half the club members donated money. Andrew Carnegie built the town a new library. Donations to rebuild the town and help the victims poured in from across the United States and the world. People from every U.S. state donated, as well as citizens in Great Britain, Germany, France, Russia, Australia, and the Ottoman Empire. In time, and as the result of public and private efforts, Johnstown rebuilt and is still there today. The former clubhouse of the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club now serves as the Johnstown Flood National Memorial. In Johnstown itself, there are multiple high water markers and plaques detailing the events of that day and providing a lasting memorial to the victims. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. We'll see you next time for more history you didn't know.